Hi, and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and on this episode, we're looking at the good, bad, and ugly of my 2023 season, keys to success, and some big lessons I learned, and really relearned in this case, and that I'm sure you can get something out of too. I shot a Pope and Young Michigan buck on public land, messed up a great opportunity the first 15 minutes of day one in Michigan on another potential Pope and Young in my backyard, and shot a Pope and Young Ohio buck, and in my first hour, my first ever public land hunt in Missouri was tagged out. I'm going to focus on two of those hunts and one lifelong struggle of mine that came to a head that maybe some of you share, and I'll share how I plan to deal with it, hopefully for good. And if you want to get the most out of our podcast, download our free journal to use with it. That's really going to help stretch you to become a greater hunter. Okay, so here are our top look-fors or things to look for during this episode. What were the top keys to my October 8th kill on public land in Michigan? The three things that had to come together for the kill. What was the major factor in my day one disaster, and how could I have planned better or made better decisions in that case? Okay, and now let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. Okay, so we're looking at my 2023 season, the good and the bad, and this actually was a great season for me in many ways, and a not good season in many ways, and just taking an honest look at that. I think that's super important to do if you want to become a better hunter, and a lot of these things that I did wrong, my mistakes this season, which I'll just be very honest about, were things I already knew, right? These weren't things that were new to me. These were things I should have known better, but sometimes that happens. You overlook things, right? And mistakes happen. So I'm going to get honest about that and talk about those things. And I'm going to focus on two hunts from this past year, not all 4 deer that I got in various states. I'm going to look at two in particular that really point out some things, right? And I'm going to dig into those more in depth. The first one I want to look at is an October 8th buck that I shot here in Michigan on public land. That was a buck that was Pope and Young buck, and I want to look at the details of that. So I want to look at three things that were really key in taking this deer, and these are things that you have to have present to take any mature buck probably 99% of the time. So this really applies to anything and any deer that you want to take that's 3 years or older, or a mature buck, I'd say, right? The first thing, you need actionable intel. Actionable intel. Now, what does that mean? Well, that has a lot to do with scouting and reasons why you're going to hunt them when and where you will, right? You need to have very strong reasons to do that to have high success rates. And so this buck was part of a group of bucks I've been watching since the summer on public land, and I was glassing them. I started to then get some trail cameras out and take inventory of these bucks that way. But these were a large, probably 8 or so bucks that I had eyeballs on that were good deer. That a few of them were Pope and Young, I'd say, and in Michigan that's really good. In Michigan on public, a 3-year-old deer is a good deer, and anything over 100 or so inches, to be honest. So these were much better than that. These were higher than your typical and in a concentrated area. So I was really interested in this group of bucks because there were potentially 3 or 4 shooters there at a minimum. There's some good deer there. So I was really curious about that. And I also was not sure I'd even be able to hunt them, because the reality is if I could see them, other people could see them, right? So I was really monitoring that. And you have to keep in mind, you have to be able to watch and hunt the other hunters or observe other hunters to help give you cues as to which deer are even huntable, right? Because other hunters are the wild card in public land hunting, right? And so you got to really monitor them as well. And so as summer was going by, I'm watching these deer, and mid-August, I go into this area and put up some trail cameras. I had a cell cam and I had a regular cam at these two different spots that I could probably get the best intel possible. One thing I noticed was this perennial scrape that they were already hitting. Okay, this is mid-August, and this is not common, especially in Michigan where you have I'd say a bad balance between bucks and does. You don't see intense scraping. Sometimes you'll see it obviously pre-rut, but especially this time of year. And I think it's because there were multiple mature bucks in the area. They'd already started competing. So I noticed that it was very fresh. They were using it. There was a big track in it. So I put a cell camera there and I just started monitoring again. But I also noticed there were 200 stands in this location. And this spot was going to be hard to hunt. And I knew that because without giving too many details, there was no way to feasibly hunt it in the morning. So it was only an evening spot. And getting out of there without tipping your hand to these deer would be very difficult. So I was really looking at one or two hunts at best there before deer knew I was hunting them. So I had to be really strategic with this. And then seeing those two stands in there from previous years, I really questioned as if those guys would probably be there day one and mess it up. So I didn't even know that I'd get any hunts. And so I needed some actionable intel, but I started getting that and seeing these deer hit these scrapes in daylight before season hit. As season progressed, I noticed that decreased, which I expected. I expected these bachelor groups of bucks to break up, but I also knew with enough cover in the area that probably a couple of those might stay around. So I still had high hopes for this area even after the bachelor buck breakup. So I kept monitoring it, right? September comes, I'm monitoring it. I'm still seeing activity at the scrape, which is good. I'm just not sure about hunters, but no one has showed up yet. So our opener comes October 1st. The conditions weren't right. I wasn't sure that a buck I wanted to shoot was daylight active enough. And again, I was unsure about these other hunters. I kind of wanted to wait and see. And I'm all about getting the first strike, but it just didn't seem that all the pieces lined up enough for me to throw a sit at it, because once I did, I knew the jig might be up. So I had to be very strategic about when I hunted, but at the same time be aggressive enough that I didn't let other hunters get in there before me, right? So that was a very difficult balancing act. So I started monitoring other hunters. The second aspect, so the first one is actionable intel. You need that. The second element is surprise, obviously. They can't know they're being hunted. Maybe younger deer, you can get away with it, and they're kind of dumb. But these were, like I said, several mature bucks in there. So you can't do that. You have to have the element of surprise. And so I started getting those pictures. October 5th, I got a picture at this scrape of one of the biggest bucks, a 10-point, and the subordinate buck that seemed to be traveling with him. And this was a key bit of intel. And they hit that right about last light. And so I'm like, okay, this is close to when I can actually shoot them. I can get in a tree at that spot. And that was where the other stand was. And another piece of intel was nobody was hunting it. Nobody was returning to these old stands. And they'd basically been abandoned. And I'd kind of confirmed that now, right? And so October 6th, I sneak in there in the evening for my first hunt. This is where things kind of lined up. I'd seen that this mature buck would hit this scrape, at least close to a last light, so I could shoot him. And there were no other hunters at this point, so I figured this was my chance. And so the only caveat here was, could I get out? I wasn't not sure I could get out without messing it up. So maybe this was the only hunt. So I go on October 6th. There's a ton of vehicles parked all over when I get there. There's like 6 vehicles. But I realized they're all going across the road in this other piece. They were just pounding this other piece, probably messing each other up from 2 different sides. But I was going across the road. So I get back there. I have a real good encounter with either the 10-point or another one just like it, but it was a ways off, right? And so I had to figure out how to get out of there. And the third element is extreme stealth. So actionable intel, I had that as good as I think I could get, or thought I could get. I had the element of surprise. No one had hunted them yet, right? I was the first one. And I had to be extremely stealthy going in and coming out. Going in wasn't the issue. It was going out, right? I would bust deer going out. It was basically a food source of sorts. So how would I get out of there? Well, I saw these deer at a distance. There were multiple deer, and one of these was one of the shooter bucks. And as fate would have it, it was my birthday, and luck was in my favor. It started raining and getting windy about an hour before dark. And so I waited till extreme dark came. I slipped out the back into this ravine, this creek ravine, and slipped out. And luckily, they were far enough off, and all that stuff helped cover my exit. The next day that worked for me, where the conditions lined up, was October 8th. And that's when I went in there, and long story short, got in there that evening, hunted that scrape again. I probably saw about 40 deer. Several times, deer groups got downwind of me. And this is important with the idea of extreme stealth. With my scent control regimen, these deer did not adversely react. And that was key, because if they had, they would have kept other deer from coming out. So being extremely stealthy is super important, and that's part of it. Right close to last light, there's 2 bucks that started coming toward the scrape. And the first one was this little buck, and I recognized it as that subordinate buck. And I look behind him, and there's this larger buck, right? But he's hanging back. He's waiting to see what this subordinate buck did. These mature bucks use subordinate bucks like a king uses a food taster to see if it'll kill him or not, right? So he's waiting to see if it was safe or not. A buck came in 8 yards downwind of me to the scrape, did not, know anything was up, worked it over, kept moving, and so I got ready for a shot because I knew he would follow. Well, I look up, and he's actually out in front of me, closer now, at about 25 yards broadside. So that's my shot. So I drew, I shoot. It was a perfect double lung hit. He was down in 5 seconds. Like, he was deader than a doornail in 5 seconds with that perfect double lung hit. And that was it. That was my Pope and Young 10-point Michigan buck. And all those things came together. The actionable intel that I had, the best I could. And I had to, again, balance the other hunter thing, right? I had to be aggressive at the same time. The element of surprise, they didn't know they were being hunted, and you got to get it done the first time or two in a spot. You really do. And extreme stealth, being able to get out without those deer knowing it, was super important. And also the scent issue. Again, if you've got other deer around you, at any time, if any of those deer are tipped off, that tips off the mature bucks that hang back, and you aren't going to see them. And so you have to get past those other deer to even have a chance at the better bucks. And a lot of people don't realize that every deer is important. You have to not be smelled, heard, or seen by any of the deer, right? You have to be extremely stealthy. And so having that scent management regimen that I have really helped me to do that with a group of does earlier, and also that buck right before I got the shot too, because any one of those could have messed it up, right? So those 3 factors came together. This is interesting. So 2 days later, I see a hunter show up on my cell cam. I look at my phone. Oh, there's another hunter, right? And after that, the buck activity, the deer activity just trickled to nothing. And that goes to show, again, on public land, you really got to weigh having the intel, but also being aggressive, because you got to be the first one in there. Okay, so here's your high IQ moment. Do you reflect on the decisions you made deer hunting? The good ones and why they turned out so good? What key things came together to make it a success? What about the flubs and fails? Do you spend time dissecting these, identifying the causes, and determining how to fix these so you don't make these same mistakes in the future? Reflecting through writing or journaling is a great way to cut through the fog and excuses we all make, but is key to really getting honest. This action, more than any I know, helps you see the reality and is the best way I know to make quick improvements toward becoming a more successful deer hunter. So I've said this before, but I encourage and challenge you to get a journal and use it, like the one we have to go with our podcast. It's really your best tool to become a greater hunter. And I will say, I personally became a much better hunter when I started my writing career. It forces you to really look at things. Something to think about. And if you like this podcast, please like, review, or leave a comment depending on where you're listening or watching, and sharing this with a friend you think may benefit. That really helps the podcast grow and is greatly appreciated. And last, I'm currently taking signups for those interested in the following. First, a whitetail hunting intensive course, which will be a weekend in-depth class diving deep into exactly how to take your hunting knowledge and skills up a notch to become a top-level hunter. And that's with me for a weekend here in Michigan. Second, our strategic land and hunting plans, where I would personally evaluate your private land and give a thorough analysis and suggestions to make it a big buck factory where you can consistently kill mature bucks year after year. And third, our public land strategic hunting analysis of where you hunt to get better results hunting pressured public lands. See the form link below to inquire about these services, and I'll be in touch. Okay, and now back to the podcast. That was the good. Now let's look at one of the hunts where I majorly messed up, and I'll be real honest about this. This was October 1st, opening day in Michigan in my backyard. Now, my backyard, I have a little food plot. I have 6.5 acres, but it's surrounded by some good cover on a neighboring land. But I also am by 4 houses. 4 houses are within 150 yards of this plot. So it's not something I count on, but I can get a couple hunts in there a year if I'm real strategic about it and I really prep and keep it very low pressure, right? And so I've been watching it all summer, my little food plot. I got a little ground blind there, and I have a ladder stand now in this little oak tree, right? And so I can slip in there pretty well. I have a very good entrance to just slip in there, hunt, and get out, right? And I'd seen this buck in late September showing up in daylight several times to the food plot. Nice buck, real narrow but real tall. And he was definitely on my list. And so when I saw that the last couple of days of September, I was like, I got to hunt here October 1st. Like, this buck is showing me that he's shootable. And that's when you got to hunt him, right? Don't hunt him before that. Hunt them when they're shootable. And so I go in there. I'd prepped all summer. My gear was all set. That wasn't an issue. I was mentally ready, which is an issue. I'd been shooting my bow consistently all summer. That was all set. But there was a few things that were not set, and this buck brought him to the surface, right? And these are things I should have known better then. So I get in there, I'd say around 5 o'clock. It was a hot day. It was like 80 degrees. I even debated on hunting, but I was like, this buck is showing you he's here. So I go out there. After 15 minutes of being in the tree stand, which I decided on, which was new this year, he pops out right in the food plot, starts nibbling on these apples from this apple tree I had there that had started dropping, and I almost couldn't believe it, right? 15 minutes in there he was. And so I know I'm going to get a shot, and, I started getting buck fever real bad, more than usual. I don't know why, and then he turned, but I started realizing that I hadn't trimmed a ton out of this oak tree I was in because, for concealment. But then I realized, man, I don't have as good a holes as I think I do. And so I drew once as he was right in front of me, and he just didn't offer me a great shot opportunity. There was, some branches I was concerned with in my hole. And so I had to let down. And whenever you do that, I think your chances of getting a good shot really go down. But I had to let down. Then he walked through some brush and was going to pop out where I have a mock scrape. And so I drew again, and I'm, getting focused on where the mock scrape is, but then he turned somewhere in that brush and was way further back than I thought, and was starting to exit the food plot. And so this became a rushed thing. I felt rushed, which is not good. I also had a new face mask, and I shoot with face masks and have for years, but this was a new one, and I hadn't practiced with it, and that is a mistake. I should have been practicing with my exact gear and not just assumed that it would be the same as other face masks I'd have, right? But this one was very hard to get down, so I was struggling to get it down in anchor because I like to feel my anchor on my face, which is another thing. And I started practicing without doing that later, right? But I was trying to get it down. I was rushed. He was leaving. I grunted and stopped him. And so with all these things going on, the letting down, the redrawing, the anticipating him being somewhere different, messing with my face, I take this quick rush shot and I clip him. I clip him low in the stomach. And it was a terrible shot, right? And so I felt really bad about that, and he bounded off into the neighbors. And I just let him go, right? I knew that this was a terrible hit, and if I was to get him, I just had to let him go. The next day, get the neighbor permission, go over there, found zero blood. I know I clipped him, but found zero blood. We searched everywhere all morning. Myself, my father, the other landowner helped, which was great, but no sign of nothing. And that was it. He just disappeared. Never saw him after that. And so that's really unfortunate when that happens when you're hunting. But it brings up a few things. And one of those is, first, making sure you practice with the exact gear for each time of year that you'll be hunting, right? Early season, practice with that gear. Mid-season, practice with that gear. Late season, heavy stuff, practice with that gear, right? And I'd gotten probably too used to shooting with just a t-shirt, with nothing on my face, and also shooting at dots on a target. And so this brought up some of those things that I'm going to change for this year, but it also brought up something else. And this is the thing I've struggled with for a long time. And I would call it shot anxiety. I'm not going to call it target panic, and I know there's a lot of stuff out there about that. And this is when you get on your target and you're basically freaking out. Your anxiety is really high, you're really stressed, and it causes you to make poor shots, right, and poor decisions. Target panic's more, I think, a lower level thing. A lot of people deal with that. I would say I'm going to call this shot anxiety, which is a much higher anxiety type thing. It's a much more difficult thing. And really what happens, and maybe some of you deal with this too, and this is why I guess I'm sharing this, is this is a neurological response to stress. In your body, you're not really controlling this. This is a reaction due to things you've experienced in the past. And we can get into the psychology of this, but it's probably from childhood stuff. But it's your body responding to stress and just wanting you to get it over with, right? Whatever you've experienced, your body is telling you when you encounter these type of stressful situations, it's just your body trying to get it over with as quickly as possible. For me, it shows up as my body is trying to get me to shoot before I'm even close to the target. Like as soon as I draw, like my body's just saying, shoot and get this over with, right? I don't like this high anxiety, get this over with. And so it's very hard to even get on target. Like literally you're fighting your own body and neurological system to just get on target and to hold on target and to go through your checklist, right? It's very difficult to do. You're constantly battling that. So it's a nervous system reaction to a stressful situation, right? And again, this probably, if you really want to dig into the psychology of this, if you know your attachment style, anxious attachment people, if you have anxious attachment style, I think this is super difficult for those people. And so understanding that's, I guess, important, right? Where does this come from? But how do you fix it? First of all, I think you have to put yourself in situations where you have to be calm under stress and really retrain your brain in those situations. And this could be in all areas of life. This could be public speaking, talking to certain people that you avoid, right? A lot of us get avoidant of things. We should push into those things as much as possible, right? It's just training your brain and nervous system to deal with stress, and that it's okay. You don't have to freak out about it, right? It's retraining your nervous system in those stressful situations. And practice mental control in these situations. Like, you don't have to listen to what your nervous system's telling you. So that's a big thing in general. When it comes down to archery specifically, this is what I'm going to do, and we'll see if it works. I'll maybe have to update you guys on this. But it's going back to lifelike targets and away from dots, because you want your body as much as possible to be used to that exact situation. So it's just mechanical, right? I've aimed at this thing 1,000 times. This is the same situation. Here's my shot sequence. Dots don't do that for you. And so I'm looking at getting some lifelike targets, or at least something that I can shoot at different lifelike situations all the time, not just once in a while at a target shoot, right? At some, event or something. Getting away from the dots, right? Hunt-like situations and adding stress, right? Many of us shoot in situations that are not stressful when we target practice. Okay, so it's doing those weird things that get your blood pressure up, running, working out, doing some push-ups, doing long holds, right? Maybe you do some short holds, same sequence. Do some long holds, same sequence. Maybe it's drawing and letting down, like in this case, right? Can I draw, hold, let down, draw, hold, let down without shooting? Just that different situation and still get a good shot in at the end, right? It's really practicing those things, and then practicing passing. Practice drawing, holding, aiming, and then saying, nope, I'm not going to shoot, let down, right? Because again, you're taking back control. If we always shoot every time, then we feel we have to do that in these situations, which in my case, I kind of felt that way, that always getting away, I've got to shoot. Well, I didn't have to, right? And so it's just getting more under control of all these things, and you're practicing that every time you shoot. So that's the good and the bad of 2 hunts of my season. The great buck I got early on October 8th, and the one I messed up on October 1st. And I had a couple other good kills as well, but that's my season, and hopefully you got something out of that as well, to just help you in your hunting journey and to become a greater hunter. Okay, and now for your high IQ takeaways and challenges. If you struggle with bad shot anxiety like I do, let me know how you've addressed it, what works, and what doesn't. Consider journaling, like I said, and moving away from dot-style targets and into more hunt-like scenarios. And sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss any of our best content. And I'll see you on the next Deer IQ podcast, where we get into our new series, The Legacy of Great Hunters. What is that? Check it out next time in our podcast, and I'll see you then.